So I had this dream that I was standing in a field surrounded by these immense, prehistoric-looking plants. The leaves seemed to give off their own heat, almost a kind of body heat, and the air was very humid. I felt strangely comforted by these leaves, very happy to be surrounded by them. As I was telling my wife about this dream, I realized that the leaves were probably tobacco leaves. My wife then said she thought my dream might be about missing the South. She said that no matter how long I lived in the cold, crowded North, I would always be a Southerner. That the South was in my blood, and in fact that lately I'd been looking a little anemic, maybe in need of a transfusion, my periodic transfusion of Southernness. So I decided to head home for a while, back down south. My ancestors settled here in the foothills of North Carolina in the early 1700s, and I still have countless cousins here. One of them, John McElwee, got in touch with me some time ago, saying the next time that I was back down, I should drop by because he wanted to show me something of importance to the McElwee family. John's a small-town lawyer who lives in that house on the hill there.
I found these rolled up together, thrown underneath a table in a local theater.
Right here in town?
Yeah, right here in town. It's the theater where I grew up. This is a variety of single door panels from the same general period. But once again, door panels are an unusual size, and you just don't run into them very often. You need a big wall to display them, and this is about the only place in the house where they really work. But
John and I are second cousins, and though we grew up in towns that were only an hour apart, this is the first time we've actually met. My cousin seems to like movies.
I only collect stills on pictures that I have some interest in. I just have an interest in the picture, and I'm anxious to pick up stills on these titles whenever I have the opportunity. Now this, just as an example, it's a picture called The Black Cat, which is another horror film from 1934. These are such gorgeous stills, and from a time when still photography on films was really an art form, and it's long gone now, but like set stills, candid stills of Karloff and Lugosi having a tea break on the set. This is just the kind of thing that I'm looking for. Portrait stills of Karloff. Now, this stuff is just so difficult to come by. Now, this film's 1934, and this is the leading lady. Her name was Jacqueline Wells, and she was 20 years old when she made this film. Oddly enough, she's one other actress that I actually wrote a letter to. 12 years ago, I sent a short note to her because I had found her address. I received a reply from her about a month ago. After 12 years, she responded to the letter. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I stood in the post office, and here it is. Look at this trembling hand. I mean, she's like, what would she be, like 83 now? And she writes this letter. And I mean,
what in the world did she say?
Well, I mean, it goes on and on. She talks about how she was sorry she had been so long in answering, and she says she has a pilot's license in here, that she flies airplanes. And it's just incredible. And there this letter was, a reply after 12 years, from an 84-year-old woman who had appeared with Karloff and Bela Lugosi in The Black Cat. I mean, the whole thing is just one of those stranger-than-fiction incidents that occasionally happen in collecting. These are trailers, previews. I love previews. Each reel contains probably 10 or so. I've got 400 reels of these in 16 millimeter and probably another 235 millimeter. But I love previews. This room is just filled with examples of movies that, well, here's a black and white film called Madam Satan. It's a 1929, sort of an oddball musical with a finale aboard a Zeppelin that crashes. And it was directed by Cecil B. DeMille. Once again, I've only heard of one print of this, and that's the print I have. Bright Leaf is a melodrama that takes place in post-Civil War North Carolina, and it's about tobacco growers and the rivalries between these cigarette manufacturers. The author of the novel on which the movie was based was also from North Carolina. Did the research based on stories involving North Carolina tobacco growers, and it just seems very likely that our great-grandfather's story had to have been incorporated into this. And I think really it's the basic theme of this movie. It's the same. What happened to our great-grandfather is pretty much what happens to Gary Cooper in this film.
Who are the co-stars with Gary Cooper in this?
Lauren Bacall and Patricia Neal, Donald Crisp, Jack Carson.
So this was a major production.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this was an A picture. Directed by Michael Curtiz. He had done Casablanca, Yankee Doodle Dandy, Adventures of Robin Hood.
Mm-hmm.
He's Warner's top director at the time.
With our great-grandfather being featured as
Exactly.
Gary Cooper. Incredible.
That's right. There we go.
I have to say I'm somewhat amazed by all this, especially the discovery of a Hollywood movie that might actually be based on my great-grandfather's life. If this is true, then I've found a sort of cinematic heirloom, a kind of surreal home movie reenacted by Hollywood stars.
This is a still file from Bright Leaf that I had.
Having just seen Bright Leaf, I'm now beginning to remember stories my father told me about my great-grandfather. How he made a fortune in tobacco, but then somehow lost it all to his rival, James B. Duke. The Dukes, of course, went on to become one of the wealthiest families in America, sort of Southern Rockefellers, while apparently my great-grandfather died in bankruptcy. So Bright Leaf would stand as a sort of record, a version, perhaps a tad melodramatic, but a version nonetheless of my great-grandfather's rise and subsequent fall to ruin.
Mr. John Harvey McElwee established and operated a tobacco factory in Statesville. He was the originator of the Durham Bull brand of smoking tobacco. His trusted foreman for many years confessed on his deathbed that he had stolen the McElwee formula and sold it to the Dukes, who manufactured it under the brand name Bull Durham. Mr. McElwee brought suit against the Dukes and fought it in the courts for years until the Dukes were awarded the verdict.
I visit another of my cousins, Elizabeth King, retired school teacher, sole surviving grandchild of John Harvey McElwee, and chronicler of the alleged injustices done to him by the Duke family.
Why do you think we lost the case?
Because Duke had more money and he lasted longer than my grandfather did in the court.
How do you feel about that now?
Well, I feel like that they cheated my grandfather, and I feel like that the least they could have done was given him some stock.
This is the mansion that John McElwee built for himself in Statesville, North Carolina. And across the street there is where that mansion once stood. There's nothing left of it now, only a parking lot, which I guess you could say now stands as a sort of monument to how my great-grandfather was steamrolled by the Duke Empire. In addition to building himself a mansion, at the height of his success, John Harvey McElwee also built 4 of these houses, which he called the Little Houses, and gave one to each of his children as they married. Only one of the houses remains in the family, the one on the right, where Elizabeth still lives.
I see it now. I think my grandfather wanted to keep an eye on his family. I think he was a person who liked to rule. He liked to have them around, and he liked to tell them what to do. So I think that's why we all ended up here.
In a row.
He was never disagreeable about things, but I think they had so much respect for him that they just did what he wanted them to do.
Did he have a sense of humor?
You know, I didn't know about that then. I don't know whether he did or not. I know he lost his teeth.